Welcome to section 3.1. This is the 22nd session of the CISSP Exam Prep series. In this session, we'll cover the foundations of business continuity. We'll answer several questions. What is business continuity planning? And what is it really trying to protect? How does it differ from disaster recovery planning? What are the 4 elements that make up the whole process? And when disaster hits, what comes before everything else? Why does this matter beyond the exam? Because disruption is not a question of if, but when. Picture a regional grocery chain when a storm knocks out its distribution hub. If leaders planned ahead, trucks reroute, stores stay stocked, and customers barely notice. If they did not, shelves empty and the brand takes a hit that lingers for months. As a security professional, you are often the one who builds that safety net before anyone knows they need it. So what is business continuity planning, and what is it protecting? At its core, it is the work of studying the risks to your business processes and then writing the policies, plans, and procedures that soften the blow when something goes wrong. The aim is to keep the organization running through an emergency. You may operate on reduced staff, limited infrastructure, or a fraction of your usual resources. That is fine. As long as your mission-critical work keeps moving, the plan is doing its job. Think of it like a body shifting blood to protect the heart and brain during a shock. Non-essential functions can wait. The vital ones must not stop. How is business continuity planning different from disaster recovery planning? This trips up a lot of candidates, so let's make it clean. Both prepare you for a disaster, and in real life their edges blur. The difference is one of perspective. Business continuity is strategic and high level, centered on business processes and keeping operations alive. Disaster recovery is tactical and technical, focused on the nuts and bolts of getting systems back, things like recovery sites, backups, and fault tolerance. Picture a ship in a storm. Business continuity is the captain deciding how to keep the voyage on course. Disaster recovery is the engine crew below deck, repairing what the storm damaged. What are the 4 elements of the business continuity process? The whole effort breaks into 4 phases that build on each other. First is project scope and planning, where you define what the effort covers and who runs it. Second is business impact analysis, where you figure out which functions matter most and what threatens them. Third is continuity planning, where you design the actual strategies to keep those functions alive. Fourth is plan approval and implementation, where leadership signs off and the plan goes into action. Think of it like building a bridge. You survey the site, study the loads it must carry, design the structure, then get it approved and construct it. Skip a phase and the whole thing wobbles. When a real disaster strikes, what comes before everything else? People. Always people. Before you think about servers, data, or restoring a single system, your first duty is to get human beings out of harm's way. The most valuable asset in any organization is not in a data center. It walks in the door every morning. So a well-built plan puts life safety at the very top, ahead of every technical concern. Recovery of systems can wait a few minutes. Someone's safety cannot. So let's bring it together. Business continuity planning keeps the organization running through an emergency by protecting mission-critical work. It takes a strategic, high-level view, while disaster recovery handles the tactical, technical rebuild. The process moves through 4 phases: project scope and planning, business impact analysis, continuity planning, and plan approval and implementation. And through all of it, people come first. Get these foundations right, and the rest of this chapter will build cleanly on top. The MCQs covering all the topics and concepts from this session are available on RooCloud.com. Practice the chapter-specific MCQs before moving on to the next session. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions or feedback, post a comment below or email us. I will see you in the next session. Welcome to section 3.2, part 1. This is the 23rd session of the CISSP Exam Prep series. In this session, we'll cover how a continuity effort gets off the ground. We'll answer several questions. What is the project scope and planning phase? And what goals guide it? How do you review the organization to find who has a stake? Who belongs on the continuity team? And why does senior leadership involvement make or break the whole thing? Why does this matter beyond the exam? Because the strongest plan in the world fails if the wrong people wrote it. Imagine a manufacturer where only the IT group builds the continuity plan in a back room. When a fire hits the plant floor, the plan says nothing about the specialized machines that actually make the product. As a security professional, you set the plan up to succeed by getting the right voices in the room from day one. So what is the project scope and planning phase, and what goals guide it? This is the setup phase, and it rests on a proven methodology rather than guesswork. 4 goals steer it. You perform a structured review of the organization through a crisis planning lens. You form a continuity team with senior management's blessing. You assess the resources available for the work, and you study the legal and regulatory landscape that shapes your response. There is no single template that fits every company, so you tailor the approach to your size, culture, and business. Think of it like planning an expedition. Before anyone packs a bag, you map the terrain, pick the team, count the supplies, and check the rules of the region you are entering. How do you review the organization to find who has a stake? You perform a business organization analysis, a structured look at every department and person with skin in the game. You map the operational units that deliver your core services to clients. You capture the critical support groups, like IT and facilities, that keep those units running. You include corporate security, since they are often first on the scene and guard your physical sites. And you loop in senior executives whose leadership keeps the organization viable. This analysis matters for 2 reasons. It seeds the list of potential team members, and it lays the foundation for everything that follows. Whoever starts the analysis, the full team must revisit and validate it, because the first pass often misses functions that only insiders from other units would recognize. Think of it like drawing a map of a building before an evacuation drill. Miss a wing, and the people in it get left behind. Who belongs on the continuity team? This is where isolation becomes dangerous. When only IT or security writes the plan in secret, 2 failures follow. The plan misses knowledge that lives only with the people who run daily operations. And units kept in the dark tend to resist the plan when it finally lands. So, you build a broad team on purpose. You want representatives from the core service departments and the functional areas your analysis surfaced. You want IT and cybersecurity experts who know the plan's technical ground. You want physical security and facilities, staff who guard the buildings. You want attorneys who understand your legal, regulatory, and contractual duties. You want human resources to handle staffing and the human toll, and public relations to manage messaging to the public. And you want senior management to set the vision and free up resources. Every member carries a bias toward their own department. And that is a feature, not a flaw. Handled well, those competing voices balance the final plan. Handled poorly, they turn into turf wars. Think of it like assembling a jury that reflects the whole community. The wider the perspective, the fairer and stronger the verdict. Why does senior leadership involvement make or break the effort? Because visible support from the top signals to everyone that this work is real, not a box-checking exercise. When a senior executive actively backs the plan, skeptics who would rather spend their time on operations suddenly take it seriously. Leaders also do things no one else can. They set priorities, allocate staff and budget, and settle disputes over which services truly matter most. There is a legal weight here too. At a publicly traded firm, officers and directors can be held personally accountable when they neglect reasonable preparation and a disaster then devastates the business. Continuity spending is not optional. Their fiduciary duty to shareholders demands that adequate measures exist. Think of it like a captain who not only orders a lifeboat drill, but shows up and runs it. The crew takes it seriously precisely because the captain does. So let's bring it together. The project scope and planning phase sets the effort up on a proven methodology guided by 4 goals: organizational review, team selection, resource assessment, and the legal landscape. The organizational review maps everyone with a stake and must be validated by the full team. That team must be broad, drawing from operations, IT, security, legal, human resources, public relations, and senior management, so no critical knowledge gets missed. And senior leadership support is the linchpin that gives the whole effort authority, resources, and legal grounding. Set this stage well, and the analysis work ahead has firm footing. The MCQs covering all the topics and concepts from this session are available on RooCloud.com. Practice the chapter-specific MCQs before moving on to the next session. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions or feedback, post a comment below or email us. I will see you in the next session. Welcome to Section 3.2, Part 2. This is the 24th session of the CISSP Exam Prep series. This part picks up the scope and planning phase where the last one left off. In this session, we'll cover the resources and outside forces that shape a continuity effort. We'll answer several questions. What resources does a continuity effort actually consume? Why is labour the cost that leadership scrutinises most? What external dependencies can quietly break your plan? How do you gain assurance about your vendors? And how do laws, regulations, and contracts shape your obligations? Why does this matter beyond the exam? Because your plan lives inside a web of other people's systems and rules. Picture a fintech startup that runs its entire ledger on a third-party cloud platform. If that provider goes dark and the startup never asked how resilient it was, the startup goes dark too. As a security professional, you are the one who traces those threads outward and makes sure none of them snap when the pressure comes. So what resources does a continuity effort actually consume? Resource needs fall across three distinct phases. During development, the team builds the 4 elements of the plan, and the main cost is the time and effort of the members and the staff they lean on. During testing, training, and maintenance, you spend some money on hardware and software, but again, the bulk of the cost is people's effort. During implementation, when a real disaster forces the full plan into action, the demands spike sharply, consuming heavy effort and direct financial expense. That is why the team must trigger a full implementation carefully but decisively. Think of it like maintaining a fire brigade. Drills and upkeep cost steady effort, but the day of a real fire consumes everything you have. Why is labour the cost that leadership scrutinises most? Because a continuity plan can pull from redundant data centres all the way down to the notepads used for first drafts. Yet the single largest resource it burns is your people. Many security professionals overlook the price of that labour. Leadership never does. Executives feel every hour that a side project pulls staff away from productive work, and they know the real cost of salary, benefits, and lost opportunity. That scrutiny gets sharpest when you ask for the time of senior executives themselves. So expect your proposal to land under a microscope and come prepared to defend it with clear, logical arguments rooted in the business case. Think of it like asking a busy surgeon to sit on a committee. You had better show exactly why their scarce hours are worth it. What external dependencies can quietly break your plan? A robust plan does not just look inward at your own processes. It looks outward at everyone you rely on. Your dependencies stretch from technology vendors supplying hardware, software, and cloud services to the legal and regulatory frameworks that govern your response. Each outside factor carries risk, and if you leave it unexamined, it can disrupt your operations at the worst possible moment. So a comprehensive plan makes the roles and responsibilities of external parties clear and puts contingency plans in place for when they falter. Think of it like a relay race. It does not matter how fast you run your leg if the runner handing you the baton stumbles. How do you gain assurance about your vendors? Start by recognizing that every technology vendor matters, not just the cloud providers. Their own continuity arrangements directly affect whether you can keep running during a crisis. So when you outsource something critical, say email and calendaring to a software as a service provider, check whether the contract spells out the service level agreement and the provider's commitments to restore operations after a disaster. But a contract alone is not enough due diligence. You should verify the vendor actually has the controls to deliver on those promises. You probably cannot fly out to inspect their facilities, and you do not need to, because their other customers are asking the same questions. Many vendors hire an independent auditing firm and share the results as a System and Organization Controls report, often called a SOC report. There are 3 tiers. The simplest covers only internal controls over financial reporting. To judge security, processing, integrity, confidentiality, privacy, or availability, you review one of the higher tier reports instead. Think of it like renting an apartment. Rather than testing every lock yourself, You trust an inspection report from a licensed professional the whole building already relies on. How do laws, regulations, and contracts shape your obligations? Heavily, and the stakes vary by sector. Some industries face laws that mandate specific continuity measures. Officers and directors of publicly traded firms carry a fiduciary duty of due diligence. Emergency services like police and fire owe their communities uninterrupted operation, and their work only grows more critical when disaster strikes. Financial institutions face strict rules meant to protect the wider economy, and organizations working with emerging technologies increasingly answer to new compliance regimes with strong human oversight requirements. Even without a specific law, your own contracts can bind you, because a service-level agreement you signed can put you in breach if a disaster stops you from delivering. There is an upside too. A strong, documented plan can win you new business, because customers trust a firm that can prove it will keep serving them through a crisis. All of this points to one move. Bring your legal counsel into the process and keep them there. Laws shift constantly and vary by jurisdiction, so involve your attorneys through testing and maintenance, not just a final review. Think of it like sailing international waters. The rules change as you cross each border, so you keep a navigator who knows them aboard the whole voyage. So let's bring it together. A continuity effort consumes resources across development, testing, and maintenance, and implementation. And in every phase, the dominant cost is your people, which is exactly what leadership scrutinizes. Your plan must look outward at external dependencies, especially technology vendors, whose own resilience you verify through independent reports rather than trust alone. And a shifting landscape of laws, regulations, and contracts shapes your obligations, so your legal counsel stays involved from start to finish. Handle the outside world well, and your plan holds up when the real test arrives. The MCQs covering all the topics and concepts from this session are available on RooCloud.com. Practice the chapter-specific MCQs before moving on to the next session. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions or feedback, post a comment below or email us. I will see you in the next session. Welcome to Section 3.3. This is the 25th session of the CISSP Exam Prep series. In this session, we'll cover the heart of continuity work, the business impact analysis. We'll answer several questions. What is a business impact analysis? And how do quantitative and qualitative views differ? What are its 5 stages? How do you set priorities and the timing metrics that guide recovery? How do you identify risks and judge their likelihood? How do you measure impact in dollars? And how do you turn all of it into a priority list? Why does this matter beyond the exam? Because you cannot protect everything at once, and pretending otherwise wastes the budget you have. Picture a subscription streaming service deciding where to spend its limited resilience funds. The billing pipeline that collects revenue matters far more than the internal wiki. A business impact analysis is how you prove that, with evidence instead of gut feeling. As a security professional, this is the work that turns a wish list into a defensible plan. So what is a business impact analysis? And how do the two views differ? It is the study that identifies which processes are critical to your survival, what threatens them, how likely those threats are, and what impact they would cause. Its results give you both numerical and judgment-based measures to prioritize where continuity resources go. 2 lenses run throughout. A quantitative assessment uses numbers and formulas, usually expressing options as dollar values. A qualitative assessment weighs the things numbers miss, like reputation, customer confidence, and workforce morale, sorting them into bands like high, medium, and low. Both matter, and people naturally favor one, so you balance both temperaments on the team. This mirrors ordinary risk assessment, with one twist. Risk work centers on individual assets, while this work centers on whole business processes. Think of it like triaging patients in an emergency room. Some decisions ride on hard vital signs, and others on a nurse's trained judgment. You need both to treat the room well. What are the 5 stages of a business impact analysis? The work unfolds in a clear sequence. First, identifying priorities, where you rank your critical business functions. Second, risk identification, where you list the threats those functions face. Third, Likelihood assessment, where you estimate how often each threat strikes. Fourth, impact analysis, where you measure the damage each threat would cause. And fifth, resource prioritization, where you sort everything into a single ordered list for action. Think of it like planning flood defenses for a town. You decide what must be protected, list what could flood it, gauge how often, estimate the damage, then rank where to build the walls first. How do you set priorities and the timing metrics that guide recovery? Start by listing your critical business functions, the activities that, if disrupted, would jeopardize your mission, and rank them by importance. Split the work across the team, then merge everyone's lists into one master ranking, taking care to gather input from areas the team does not directly represent. This is the qualitative side. On the quantitative side, you assign each asset a value in money, its asset value, which feeds later calculations. Then you set 2 timing measures. The maximum tolerable downtime is the longest a function can be down before the harm becomes irreparable. Critical functions carry a shorter maximum tolerable downtime than routine ones. The recovery time objective is how quickly you believe you can actually restore a function, and it must always sit below the maximum tolerable downtime, so nothing stays down longer than the business can survive. There is a data loss counterpart too. The recovery point objective is the amount of data you can afford to lose, measured backward from the moment of the incident. If you back up transaction logs every 15 minutes, your recovery point objective is 15 minutes, so you might lose up to a quarter hour of data. Think of it like a delivery promise. Maximum tolerable downtime is the absolute deadline. Recovery time objective is your realistic estimate, and recovery point objective is how much of the shipment you are willing to lose along the way. How do you identify the risks facing your functions? Recall that a risk exists when an asset has a vulnerability and a threat can exploit it. In this stage, you list every hazard, and the common ones come easily, while the obscure ones take creativity. Hazards fall into 2 families. Natural threats include violent storms, lightning, wildfires, earthquakes, landslides, volcanic activity, and pandemics. Human-caused threats include terrorism and unrest, workplace violence, theft and vandalism, fires and explosions, prolonged power loss, building collapse, transportation and internet disruptions, service provider outages, and economic crises. These lists are starting points, not complete inventories, so draw on every corner of the team. This stage is purely qualitative. You are naming what could go wrong, not yet judging how likely or how costly. Think of it like a doctor listing every condition a patient could develop before running a single test. How do you judge how likely each threat is? Some threats are far more plausible than others, and geography drives much of that. An earthquake is a real concern in Southern California, but far less so on the Gulf Coast, where a tropical storm flips the odds. To capture this, you assign each threat an annualized rate of occurrence, the number of times you expect it to happen in a typical year. Annualizing lets you compare wildly different risks on one scale. You base these figures on your own history, the team's professional experience, and outside experts like meteorologists and seismologists. You can also lean on free resources, since government agencies publish earthquake and flood hazard maps, and insurers hold deep actuarial data they may share. Think of it like a weather forecast. You cannot know exactly when the storm comes, but you can put a solid probability on it and plan accordingly. How do you measure the impact of each risk in dollars? This stage turns likelihood into consequence using 3 linked quantitative metrics. The exposure factor is the share of an asset's value that a risk would destroy, written as a percentage. If a fire would wreck 70% of a building, the exposure factor is 70%. The single loss expectancy is the money lost each time the risk hits, and you get it by multiplying asset value by exposure factor. A building worth $500,000 with a 70% exposure factor gives a single loss expectancy of $350,000. The annualized loss expectancy is the average yearly cost, found by multiplying the single loss expectancy by the annualized rate of occurrence. If that fire strikes about once every 30 years, roughly a 3% annual chance, the annualized loss expectancy is around $10,500 a year. That number is not a budgeting figure, since no fire happens yearly, but it is invaluable for ranking risks. Alongside the math, you must weigh non-monetary damage too, like lost goodwill, employees leaving after long downtime, community obligations, and bad publicity. These resist a price tag but matter just as much because a wrecked customer base leaves you no business to return to. Think of it like appraising storm damage to a house. You total the repair bill, but you also weigh the neighborhood's reputation, which no invoice captures. How do you turn all of this into a priority list? This final stage merges the two worlds. On the quantitative side, it is simple. List every risk and sort it in descending order by annualized loss expectancy. Then work down from the top until you exhaust your resources, which happens long before you run out of risks. Then you fold in the qualitative concerns, an exercise that is more art than science. Sitting with senior management, you may raise or lower a risks rank based on judgment the numbers miss. A fire suppression company, for instance, might elevate fire above an earthquake that would cause more physical damage because being destroyed by the very thing you sell against would shatter its reputation beyond recovery. Think of it like packing one lifeboat. The manifest gives you a starting order, but human judgment decides who truly boards first. So let's bring it together. A business impact analysis identifies your critical processes and the threats to them using both quantitative and qualitative views. It runs through 5 stages: identifying priorities, risk identification, likelihood assessment, impact analysis, and resource prioritization. Along the way, you set asset value and the timing metrics of maximum tolerable downtime, recovery time objective, and recovery point objective, then measure damage through exposure factor, single loss expectancy, annualized rate of occurrence, and annualized loss expectancy. Finally, you merge the numbers with human judgment into one ranked list. Master this, and every continuity decision that follows rests on solid ground. The MCQs covering all the topics and concepts from this session are available on RooCloud.com. Practice the chapter-specific MCQs before moving on to the next session. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions or feedback, post a comment below or email us. I will see you in the next session. Welcome to section 3.4. This is the 26th session of the CISSP exam prep series. In this session, we'll cover how you turn analysis into a real defense. We'll answer several questions. What is continuity planning, and what plan does it produce? How do you develop a strategy that decides which risks to fight? What are provisions and processes, and which assets do they protect? How do you safeguard people, your buildings, and your infrastructure? Why does this matter beyond the exam? Because a ranked list of risks does nothing until you build something against them. Picture a regional bank that knows a power failure could freeze its branches. Knowing it changes nothing. Installing backup generators and a standby site changes everything. Continuity planning is where the analysis finally becomes concrete protection. As a security professional, this is the stage where your work starts holding real weight against a real disaster. So, what is continuity planning, and what does it produce? This phase takes the prioritized risks from your impact analysis and builds strategies to shield your protected assets from harm. It has 2 subtasks: strategy development and provisions and processes. The output is a continuity of operations plan, which spells out how you keep critical functions running from the moment a disruption hits through up to a month of sustained operation. Think of it like a hospital's surge plan. Once you know which departments must never close, you design exactly how they stay open when the building is under strain. How do you develop a strategy that decides which risks to fight? Strategy development is the bridge from analysis to action. You take the prioritized list and decide which risks the plan will actually address. You cannot defend against everything, because a zero downtime posture against every possible threat is simply impossible to fund. So you return to your maximum tolerable downtime estimates and sort each risk into acceptable or must mitigate. Some calls are obvious. A blizzard threatening a facility in a desert is negligible and acceptable, while a monsoon in a region that floods must be mitigated. Cost always frames the decision, since it only makes sense to mitigate when the mitigation costs less than the expected damage. Think of it like choosing which home repairs to make before a rough winter. You fix the failing roof, but you let the squeaky door wait. What are provisions and processes, and which assets do they protect? This subtask is the meat of the entire plan. Here you design the concrete procedures and mechanisms that mitigate the risks you deemed unacceptable. Everything you build protects one of three categories of assets: people, buildings, and facilities, and infrastructure. Think of it like fortifying a settlement. You protect the residents, you protect the walls and shelters, and you protect the wells and roads that keep it alive. Each category needs its own kind of defense. How do you safeguard people during an emergency? People come first, always, ahead of every business goal. Your first duty is to keep everyone safe before, during, and after an emergency, and only then help them carry out their tasks as normally as circumstances allow. That means giving teams the resources to do their jobs, and if people must stay on site for long stretches, arranging shelter and food. A serious plan maintains stockpiles of provisions in an accessible spot, sized to feed the operational and support staff for an extended time, with a rotation schedule so nothing spoils. Think of it like provisioning a lighthouse crew. Before you worry about the lamp, you make sure the keepers have food, water, and a warm place to sleep. How do you safeguard your buildings and facilities? Many businesses depend on specialized sites, from offices to plants to warehouses, and your impact analysis flags which ones are critical. For each, your plan addresses two options. Hardening provisions strengthen the existing facility against identified risks, ranging from something as simple as fixing a leaky roof to installing reinforced shutters and fireproof walls. When hardening is not feasible, you turn to alternate sites where operations can resume faster than the maximum tolerable downtime allows. Note that alternate sites usually belong to disaster recovery rather than continuity, since you identify the need during planning but only an actual interruption triggers the move. Think of it like protecting a coastal home. First you raise the foundation and seal the windows, and if the location is hopeless, you arrange a safe place to stay inland. How do you safeguard your infrastructure? Every business runs on infrastructure, and for most that means an IT backbone of servers, workstations, and the communication links between sites. Your plan protects it two ways, mirroring how you protect buildings. Physically hardening systems means adding protective measures like clean fire suppression and uninterruptible power supplies. Alternative systems means building in redundancy, either duplicate components or fully redundant systems that run from different facilities. The same logic extends to power, transportation, water, and financial links. And moving to the cloud does not remove this concern. You no longer run the hardware, but you still depend on your provider's physical infrastructure, so you must confirm you are comfortable with their continuity planning. A failure at a key cloud provider can hurt just as much as a failure of your own gear. Think of it like wiring a home with a backup power line. You harden the main supply, but you also keep a second source ready for the moment the first one drops. So let's bring it together. Continuity planning turns your prioritized risks into a continuity of operations plan through two subtasks. Strategy development decides which risks to mitigate, weighing maximum tolerable downtime against the cost of protection. Provisions and processes then build the real defenses across three asset categories. People come first, with safety and supplies. Buildings are protected through hardening or alternate sites. And infrastructure is protected through physical hardening or redundant systems, on-premises and in the cloud alike. Do this well, and your organization has a concrete shield ready before the storm arrives. The MCQs covering all the topics and concepts from this session are available on RooCloud.com. Practice the chapter-specific MCQs before moving on to the next session. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions or feedback, post a comment below or email us. I will see you in the next session. Welcome to section 3.5. This is the 27th session of the CISSP exam prep series. In this session, we'll cover how a continuity plan becomes real and stays alive. We'll answer several questions. How do you win approval for the plan? How do you implement it and keep it maintained? Why do communication and training matter so much? What belongs in the written documentation? And how do you keep the plan from going stale? Why does this matter beyond the exam? Because a brilliant plan that lives in one person's head is worthless the day that person is unreachable. Picture a logistics firm whose only continuity expert is stranded far from the office when a flood hits the warehouse. If the plan is written, endorsed, and rehearsed, the team acts without her. If it is not, they freeze. As a security professional, this final phase is what turns your analysis into something the whole organization can actually use. How do you win approval for the plan? You seek endorsement from the very top. If you kept senior leadership involved throughout, this is smooth. If this is their first look, be ready to explain the plan's purpose and provisions at length. Aim for the signature of your highest executive, the chief executive officer, chairperson, or president. That signature does more than approve the document. It signals to the whole organization that continuity matters, and it gives the plan weight in the eyes of other managers who might otherwise dismiss it as a minor technical exercise. Think of it like a new company policy. When it carries the founder's name, people treat it as real rather than optional. How do you implement the plan and keep it maintained? Once leadership approves, you build an implementation schedule that puts your dedicated resources to work as quickly as the scope and the organization's appetite allow. But deployment is not the finish line. After the resources are in place, the team stands up a maintenance program, a standing effort that keeps the plan responsive as the business evolves. Think of it like launching a new product. Shipping it is only the start. You commit to updates and support so it keeps working long after release day. Why do communication and training matter so much? Because a plan nobody understands cannot be executed. Everyone touched by the plan, directly or indirectly, needs training on the overall approach and on their own specific responsibilities, and those duties must be spelled out clearly. At a minimum, everyone in the organization deserves an overview briefing, which also reassures staff that leadership has thought seriously about the risks. People with direct roles need deeper, hands-on training and evaluation on their tasks. And you train at least one backup for every task, so a single injured or unreachable person cannot break the response. Think of it like a theatre production. Every actor rehearses their part, and every lead has an understudy ready to step in. What belongs in the written documentation, and why write it down at all? Committing the plan to paper delivers real benefits. It gives responders a reference even when senior members are absent, preserves a historical record of the reasoning behind each choice, and forces the team to expose hidden flaws by writing everything out, so a draft can be circulated for a sanity check. The document itself is built from several standard components, which we will walk through. Think of it like a building's blueprints. The knowledge cannot live only in the architect's memory. It must be on paper so any qualified crew can build or repair from it. What core statements anchor the document? Several written statements set the tone and authority of the plan. The continuity planning goals describe what the effort aims to achieve, decided early and rarely changed, such as keeping a call center below 15 consecutive minutes of downtime. The statement of importance conveys how critical the plan is, ideally as a letter under the chief executive officer's signature, which gives it tremendous weight. The statement of priorities lists the critical functions in ranked order, drawn straight from the identifying priorities stage. The statement of organizational responsibility declares that continuity is everyone's job. And the statement of urgency and timing conveys how pressing the work is and lays out the implementation timetable. Think of it like the charter at the front of a project. It states the mission, who signed off, what comes first, and by when. How do you capture risk decisions in the document? 2 sections handle this. The risk assessment portion recaps the impact analysis, including the actual figures for asset value, exposure factor, annualized rate of occurrence, single loss expectancy, and annualized loss expectancy, along with the reasoning, while noting that it is a point-in-time snapshot that needs regular updates. The risk acceptance and mitigation section then records the outcome for each risk. For accepted risks, it explains why they're acceptable and what future events might reopen the decision. For unacceptable risks, it details the provisions put in place to reduce them. A crucial discipline here: make leaders formally document every risk acceptance, because auditors will hunt for those artifacts later. Think of it like a signed medical consent form. When someone declines a treatment, you record it clearly, so the decision is never in doubt. Why does a Vital Records program matter, and what does it do? A Vital Records program states where your critical business records live and how backup copies are made and stored. The hardest part is often just identifying which records are truly vital, because as organizations shifted from paper to digital, records scattered across servers, cloud services, and individual repositories. A powerful way to find them is to ask functional leaders a simple question. If we had to rebuild the organization tomorrow in a brand new location with no access to our files, what would you need? That framing forces people to picture the actual rebuild and surface the records that matter. Once identified, you track down where each one is stored. Think of it like a household emergency folder. You decide which documents you truly could not live without. Then make sure you know exactly where each copy sits. What do emergency response guidelines provide? They give the first people to detect a crisis the exact steps to take before the full team assembles. The document should include immediate response procedures like safety, fire suppression, and notifying emergency agencies, a list of who to notify such as executives and team members, and secondary procedures for first responders to follow while waiting for the team to gather. This guidance must be easy for any potential first responder to reach, because in a disruption, every minute of delay adds to your downtime. Think of it like the safety card in an aeroplane seat pocket. It is written for the untrained passenger nearest the exit, and it must be within arm's reach the instant it is needed. How do you keep the plan from going stale? Through maintenance and regular testing, a continuity plan is a living document because organizations change constantly and their continuity needs shift with them. The team should not disband after writing the plan. It should meet periodically to review the plan and the results of tests. Minor tweaks can happen informally by unanimous consent, while drastic shifts in mission or resources may send you back to the drawing board. Practice firm version control, destroying old copies so no one follows an outdated plan. Weaving continuity duties into job descriptions keeps the work fresh and accountable. And a formal exercise program confirms the plan still works and that people are trained to perform under pressure. Think of it like maintaining a car. Regular servicing and the occasional test drive catch problems long before you are stranded on the road. So let's bring it together. Approval from the top gives the plan authority, and a solid implementation schedule plus a standing maintenance program put it into motion. Communication and training, with a backup for every role, make sure people can actually execute it. The written documentation captures the goals and key statements, the risk assessment and acceptance decisions, the vital records program, and the emergency response guidelines. And ongoing maintenance and testing keep it alive as the business changes. Get this phase right, and your continuity work becomes a durable capability rather than a document on a shelf. The MCQs covering all the topics and concepts from this session are available on RooCloud.com. Practice the chapter-specific MCQs before moving on to the next session. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions or feedback, post a comment below or email us. I will see you in the next session.